Good morning and welcome to this interview of the Global Donor Platform for Rural Development, which is part of a special series we are promoting with our members. Joining us today is Wilma Van Esch, Head of Food Security at the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. Good morning, Wilma.
Good morning.
Wilma has extensive experience in agriculture and development, having worked for both the Ministry and the United Nations in multiple positions and across many countries, such as Ghana, India, Tanzania, and Kenya. Wilma, again, welcome to today's interview. We're really pleased and honored to have you with us. I will now give the floor to Michelle for the first 3 questions.
Thank you, Maurizio, and a big thank you and welcome to you, Wilma, for me as well. Our first question is to get a reading of the atmosphere from the 2021 UN Food System Summit. After such an important year for a focus around food systems, where do we stand as donors in the road ahead? And also, what are some of the short and long-term actions to sustain the momentum?
I think, on the Food System Summit, you might be knowing that I've only started in August last year. And of course, I've been looking back at that time about what happened before on the pre-summit. And I have been really amazed about the energy and the discussions with many different stakeholders which have took place, all the coalitions which were formed. So I looked at it as a very good process and essential to have it for a good food system thinking. But it will be difficult to sustain the momentum. I think most important for me now are the national pathways. So, of course, first of all, have the national pathways been formed through an inclusive process? Have they been? Are they well evolved? But if those national pathways are based on an inclusive process, then that's maybe a very good way for us as development partners to really support the national pathways. I think this food transformation in the countries itself, food system transformation in the countries itself, is has to be driven by the local organizations, the governments, the private sector, the civil society. And for us, we can support when there is a clear plan. So those national pathways, I think, are crucial for me. And I think besides that, another one on the longer term is also the science policy interface. It's clear that we all would like to work much more evidence-based. We would like to have our policies based on the latest scientific insights. And of course, the different coalitions which have been formed, which jointly can create a lot of know-how.
How this is related to the complex global situation right now? How does the ongoing debate on food systems transformation fit into our current global crises of conflict and rising food prices?
Of course, it's very sad what happens at the moment with the conflict in Ukraine and the rising food prices and the distress that will give for so many people. I think it only emphasizes the importance of the food system thinking, and that we on the world, we are depending on each other. And this whole interconnectedness and the importance of working together to avoid further aggravating the food crisis is going to be crucial.
On that note, what do you think donors can do to coordinate their efforts during these unprecedented times?
I think maybe to start, maybe donors is not the right term. I think it's about all the development partners. So I think that's what the Food System Summit and the Food System Thinking has learned us, that we won't be able to do it alone as donors. Huh? It's really it's multi-stakeholder. It implies an inclusive dialogue and action involving all stakeholders, like the government, civil society, private sector, knowledge institutes. So how to combine our forces, and how to be in a dialogue with each other about what's the best way forward. I think that's going to be essential. In this unprecedented times, we will need big programs which we can support jointly, and for that we need those multilateral organizations. But I also think about organizations like the CGIAR, the CG on international research. That's also an example how we as donors can jointly support and facilitate research which would benefit system transformation, but also would benefit directly in poverty reduction for the poorest. I was in an embassy still in the time when we were having the budget support programs, when we were having the sectoral approach, where we were having a sectoral working group on agriculture or rural development, on natural resources, and we were in those working groups together with government and different partners working together. And that were also the days of the Paris Accra agenda. It's about alignment and harmonization. And so it's a bit sad to see that at the moment we are more back on the individual projects. But having said that, I know from many countries and from our embassies that a lot of donors are still working at country level together. But we could do better. These national pathways could help us to group together again behind a certain plan, driven by the local partners themselves. And that would help us to join forces and to work together, not only as donors, but also with civil society and private sector. Yeah, I think that's, and I think in that setup, also the coalitions which have been formed under the national pathways, like the Zero Hunger Coalition, would be a great asset.
Thanks so much, Wilma. I will now pass the floor over to Maurizio for his questions. Thanks again.
Now I have two more questions for Wilma today. Related to your last point on donor coordination, how do you think the donor platform should facilitate donor coordination in the current context?
I think what we are doing at the moment already by meeting and discussing helps. So it's discussing the challenges worldwide, what the different responses are, how our governments are reacting on it. I think that is very useful and will help us in forming our policies and programs. Maybe what could help is also focusing on more on regional level. So looking at what the different partners in the platform are doing at regional level, and how we can work together. Maybe also once meeting in the region could be useful.
So thanks very much for these insights and these suggestions. Now, my final question pertains more to your role as the head of food security for the Netherlands. What are the priorities of the government of the Netherlands on food security? And further, how have these priorities been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic? And finally, what is the outlook for the coming year in view of the current crisis? Over to you, Wilma.
Thank you, Mauricio. Yeah, I think from us, the Netherlands is focusing on SDG 2. So that's very clear. That's the basis. But at the moment, we are in the process of developing a new policy. So we have a new minister, and so I'm not 100% sure how the future will look like. But I assume we will stay with SDG 2. Within SDG 2, we have the two pillars: the zero hunger and sustainable production, and aimed at resilience. Maybe very concrete, we have agreed with Parliament that we would have 3 results indicators by 2030. We should have 32 million people to be food secure by our support. We should have 8 million smallholders with a higher production and income. And we should have 8 million hectares of sustainable, ecologically cultivated farmland. So we are working on those targets. We're mostly working in Africa. It's Sahel and the Horn and the Great Lakes, and a bit in MENA. And I think what I maybe specifically also want to mention is that we see the role of women in agriculture and the food system as crucial, both as producers and as consumers. So in our policy and in our programs, we have we have very specific, we look specifically also at how to reach out to women. So on the COVID-19 pandemic, yeah, I think like with all donors, we have also seen that the COVID has had great impact on programs, also on the situation in the different partner countries. The expected outputs of some of the programs have been delayed, and so we have quite some that we have that the programs will take a bit longer to reach the targets, but we still assume that we can reach it. And the current crisis, yes, so there was already the crisis because of the COVID, and now the current crisis with Ukraine has further increased, and maybe the current crisis will show that the outlook for the SDG on improvement of food security for women and men is even more important than ever. So we really need that, and I sincerely hope that we, by working together, can address this big challenge, and can gather together between all the different partners I mentioned earlier, the local partners, the government, the civil society, the private sector, and to support the countries to improve the resilience and to transform the food systems. To be able to have a viable and sustainable food system worldwide, we will. I mean, that has become even more important at the moment. So the outlook is we have to work on SDG 2 together. Thank you.